Morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on your time zone. I am Gaël Lebris, a senior aviation planner and senior technical principal for WSP in the United States. And I am also the chair of the airport think tank of ENAC alumni that is hosting this research project. ENAC is the National University of Civil Aviation in Toulouse, France. Just before we start the webinar, just a reminder, you have a control window that should have popped up on the right side of your screen. And through this control window, you can ask questions anytime, and we will address them at the end of the webinar. And you can also download the presentation material in the sub-window called End House. Okay, let's start. So before talking about the research project itself, I would like to address a question that some of you might have reading the title of the research project and the webinar. Can we really foresee the future, and especially the very long-range future, because we're talking about plus 20 years and also plus 50 years, 2070. And for that, I would like to quote two people. The first one is the aviator and writer, and Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, that was saying about the future, that when it comes to the future, it's not about foreseeing it, but about making it possible. And this is really the key idea of this research project. If we, the aviation industry, and especially airport operators and flight operators, if we are not able to reflect on our past, look ahead to the future and build our own future, well, we are going to be behind everything that's going to happen and influence our industry. So we should have a vision for ourselves, for our future. And as the aviation history shows us, a lot of things that have happened in aviation happened because of pioneers that had a vision for the future of the industry. Second quote is from Alain Bozell. He was the General Secretary of the French War Ministry. We are in 1944. World War II is still ongoing. We are still fighting for freedom and democracy in Europe and other parts of the world. And he wrote a visionary memo to General de Gaulle, the head of the provisional French government, about the necessity for France to get an airport of Paris that will meet some specific criteria. And what is amazing in this memo, and I think one of these days I'm going to translate it in English, is that we have more or less everything about the future airport. You know, he talks with his own word of that time about hub and spoke, aerotropolis, or the first and last mile. It's an amazing document, and just again to show you that yes, it is possible to have a long-term vision for the airport industry and foresee this kind of major changes. So about the project itself, we started this research initiative in March 2019, and what we did is we explored 11 topics, kind of all you can eat about the future of airport. And our goals are first to research about the future of industry, of course, and paving the way for these changes, but also to raise awareness to airport operators and the broader airport operations community about all of these challenges. Because I am myself a former airport operator. I worked 6 years for at Paris Charles de Gaulle for Group ADP, and you know, when you are at the middle of the day-to-day operations and management, you do not have necessarily the time to stop, you know, and again, reflect on your past and look ahead, you know, for future challenges. So part of the objectives of this project is also to raise awareness and educate the community about, the airport community about the future challenges. This is the research team, myself as the principal investigator, my planners, Louis-Jean Nguyen and Bissia Tagoe, assisting me. And just to let you know, this was not a paid project. It's really an industry involvement. We are all volunteering ourselves and the panel members just to have good discussions between good aviation people and think about the future of the industry. And this is the project panel. I'm not going through to go through the list, but just to show you that our panel reflects the diversity of our industry, not only in terms of regions of the world, but also in terms of representation of the stakeholders. About the timeline, so we have this phase one about the world in 2040 and 2070 and the airports in 2040 and 2070. We are delivering the research papers. I will talk about that at the end of the presentation at the end of this week. And starting next month, we are going to start phase two with national and regional focus groups. We are going to have similar panels regionally and discussing about how the findings of the future of airports worldwide can apply locally and about all the local specificities, etc. And by the way, if you are an airport operator or representing an industry, a professional organization, or a local government, please feel free to reach out to me at the end. After the webinar, you have my contact information at the end of the presentation material if you would be interested in joining one of these regional focus groups. And phase three, to be determined, most likely 2021, we are going to have different kind of focus groups that are going to explore how to apply these findings, and this time per market segments, larger airports, regional airports, general aviation facilities, maybe spaceports as well, all of these findings apply to these different types of airports. So now what about these findings? And before starting with the world in 2040 and 2070, just to let you know, we are limited in time. So I'm just going to present a couple of items, findings, ideas per topic. But we explored a lot of different aspects of each topic. So I really invite you to read the white papers, or if you don't have the time, at least to go on the website. I will direct you at the end of the presentation to read the summary of findings and maybe take a look at the poster, because we have way more than just these specific messages. So about the world in 2040 and 2070, between now and 2070, we are going to add up to 3 billion-ish people to the world. That's a lot. And, we say that the beginning of the 21st century is a momentum for Asia. The second half of the 21st century is really going to be a momentum for Africa. We are going to have a boom of the population in Africa. At the same time, the revenues are going to rise. The condition of life is going to improve. And we are going to have a strong middle class appearing in Africa, a little bit like Southeast Asia has been experiencing for the past few decades. And you see that on the map appearing on the screen right now, that if we consider the largest metropolitan areas in the world, it's not that the metropolitan areas of Western Europe and Northern Africa are going to shrink, but it's going to be the African and Asian metropolitan areas growing faster. And you're going to have this displacement of the center of mass of the world in terms of demography going eastward. And this is going to have an impact on the balancing of power and on the aviation industry overall. About sustainable business models and new sources of funding, maybe we could talk about hours about that, but one big marker of the coming decade is privatization. And I know that in some countries or regions, and for instance, the United States of America, we used to say that privatization doesn't work or it's not happening, and that's not true. It's true that, for instance, in the US, most of the airports are still owned and operated overall by cities, counties, and even states. But if you look into details, you see that there is a kind of rampant privatization of some part of the airport. For instance, an airport is going to decide to have a concession or a build-operate transfer or other kind of agreement with the private entities to operate a terminal building or the parking garage or the retail and food and beverage or something else. So we still have this privatization. And just mentioning one very successful example, for instance, is Terminal 4 at New York JFK that is operated by a private entity. About smart airports and the new or emerging technologies. Well, we already have a first IT revolution at airports with the information technologies that are improving both the passenger journey and airport operations with all kinds of systems, sensors, and algorithms. Now, what is emerging, what is coming in the second IT revolution? And this time, the I is going to be intelligence. Intelligence systems and technology. You might have heard about artificial intelligence, machine learning, artificial neural networks. All of these technologies are coming. Some of them are already here, and you might know or not, but some products already proposed, for instance, to optimize ground handling operations based on some kind of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in the terminal facilities on the passenger journey, I would like to mention biometry, which is going to change a lot in the passenger journey. And biometry plus other kind of sensors are going to straightforward some part of the processes of the passenger journey. And I'm thinking, for instance, about security screening when you are going from the public area to the gate. The post 9/11 standard might be lightened actually thanks to sensors and biometry and risk-based approach of the security check. Security threats of the future. Again, we could talk a lot about that, and I invite you to check the white papers about all the different kind of issues of the future. But I would like to give you one big message. After 9/11, we heard agencies talking about terrorist organizations getting bioweapons or radioactive materials or these kind of things. And it's not the focus of these organizations right now. As despicable as they are, they try to be efficient at their level. And the main patterns of today are the same than yesterday. They have been the same since the 70s at least. And most likely they will be the same tomorrow. What they do typically is to get a bunch of crazies, give them weapons, maybe a bomb, and they send them into the public area to make the largest amount of casualties that they can. And this is very difficult to predict and to stop when it happens. And we will still see this kind of patterns through direct terrorist attacks. Of course, we have to take into consideration other threats. And again, some of them are listed on the slide, and I invite you to take a look at the white paper. And one of the big things in security and one of the emerging trends is really it's really about collaboration between the airport stakeholders with the governmental agencies. And one thing that we can do actually for raising awareness and trying to stop this kind of actions is to educate the broader airport operations community about these threats, including, for instance, the taxi community, the TNCs, that can, raise the red flag when they see something. About aviation safety, we are experiencing a very exciting period of aviation history because we are progressing a lot. Yesterday, airport safety was mainly based on the individual experience of the good members of the airport operations community and on very prescriptive standards. And today, we are moving toward safety management systems. SMS is the systemic and systematic approach of safety, and towards more risk-based elements in the standards. And through SMS, we are accumulating a lot of data, a lot of accidents and incident reports. And so we are creating databases at the scale of individual airports, but also nations and the world. And so based on that, we could do data mining. And with some machine learning and artificial intelligence, have a more predictive approach of safety. Of course, the tools and the system cannot substitute to the knowledge of the field. And when we will get all of these predictions from the systems, we'll have to reconcile that with the reality of the field. But yet, they are going to help us. And actually, they're already helping us. Some airports and some national aviation authorities already have this approach of predictive safety based on data mining and statistics and models using the data that we are accumulating thanks to SMS and other initiatives. On the left side of the screen, you have a success story that I don't have time to detail, but again, it's something you can find in the white paper about how we improved aviation safety during construction. And on the right side of the screen, just one message that I want to give you. Aviation, the level of safety is not the same around the world. And based on ICAO reports or on the implementation of standards and recommended practices, we see some clear gaps from some countries or regions of the world. The same that are going to boom in the very near future in terms of aviation traffic. So it's very important that all together we help these specific regions or countries to improve in terms of level of safety and safety practices and safety cultures. Airside and airspace compatibility, well, the big thing of the coming decade is diversity. Today, a lot of airports already experience that. You see, for instance, single-laser aircraft being used for long-haul international flights. So you have this mix that you have to accommodate at your facilities that are mainly designed for larger aircraft. You start to see small drones, UAS, buzzing around the airports. And in the very near future, we might see eVTOL, you know, air taxis or urban air mobility coming as well. And it's not, for instance, the end of the large aircraft. Yes, Airbus is stopping the production of the A380, but this is not the end of the journey for the larger aircraft. It's just the beginning. You see the 777-9 coming. You see the A350-1000 already flying, and these are very long, large, and demanding aircraft. By 2040, we might see again supersonic aircraft flying, at least for business aviation, maybe for some transoceanic routes as well. And in 2070, why not hypersonic aircraft? The technology is already here and is becoming more accessible thanks to advancement of hypersonic technologies due to commercial space transportation and governmental projects. And what about spacecraft? You know, it's already a reality today. Commercial aircraft are already coexisting with spacecraft in the upper airspace. For instance, the east coast of the United States, you have all of these spaceports, including Cape Canaveral. When they are shooting eastward, well, we have to close a large piece of airspaces, and this has a direct impact on the air traffic. So right now, the FAA and NASA, they work together. They have tools for a more dynamic allocation of the airspace, but we'll see more and more these kind of interactions, and you will see all those spacecraft operating from airports. You know, for instance, Virgin Orbit, they will launch small satellites using a B747-400 as a carrier. And the last message is about a potential change in the economic model of airlines. Thinking about all of these regions that still have to grow in terms of safety, what if we see another kind of airline coming on the market with, for instance, one entity providing flight operations and holding the certificate of operator, and another entity teaming with the first one, marketing the routes and getting the passengers, etc. And why not the aircraft manufacturers in the first role? Today, they already build aircraft, they lease aircraft, they train flight crews. So what about offering flight operations with a different arrangement than today for constituting an air carrier? About passenger terminals and customer experience, we already talked about the new technologies that are going to make the passenger journey easier and faster. One message that I want to give you, we see a lot of these mega terminals, cathedral terminals, you know, popping up at the largest airport cities around the world. I think it's very important that we do not lose the main goal of airports. You know, we have to be passenger-centric. What the passengers want, you know, is to kind of back to the future, you know, at the beginning of commercial aviation. You get out of your car or your bus or your whatever mass transit, and you want to get directly to the gate. You know, you want something that is simple. If you have to walk a lot, take an APM or an air train, change twice, take a bus, etc., well, I think we failed something in terms of design and planning and vision for the terminal facility. And I don't say that mega airports are bad, or that whatever it's called, polymorph concepts are bad. It's not what I say. I say that we really have, when we do this kind of things, keep in mind, that we have to design for the passengers, have a passenger-centric vision, and also an operation-centric vision. If you need a special equipment to change a light bulb in a terminal building, again, you failed something in terms of design. You didn't take into consideration the needs of the operations. Operational performance and resilience, a little bit like with safety. Yesterday, there were limited information sharing between the stakeholders. Today, thanks to airport collaboration, collaborative decision-making, ACDM, we have an enhanced information sharing and collaboration between the stakeholders and even between airports of the same system. And tomorrow, again, based on all these databases and the data that we are already sharing between stakeholders, we will have the same kind of data mining and predictive tools that I was talking about when I was talking about the future of aviation safety. Another big marker of our century is, of course, the impact of climate change, which already has effects on airport operations today. In climate change, it's not only about the climate anomalies, the big extreme weather conditions that are very impactful, but it's not that only, we have also all kinds of changes on the overall climate that are going to impact airport operations. For instance, the use or not of air conditioning, the aircraft de-icing operations, etc. And just to let you know, with my deputy, Lou Jiang, we were awarded the WSP Research and Innovation Fellowship at the beginning of the year, and we are working on a methodology for assessing and mitigating the effects of climate change on airports. That might be actually a future Snack and Learn webinar with WSP. About communities and mobility, well, I will say, I don't like that much this expression about neighboring and or surrounding communities. Airports are part of the communities. They're at the middle of it. And we should go away of this vision of an airport, with a frontier, with a break in terms of urban continuum between the airport and the surrounding communities. We have to get everyone more integrated, which doesn't mean bringing population closer to the airport. We try to avoid that for noise mitigation issue, of course, but we have to restore a kind of continuum because, for instance, at some airports, some neighboring communities, as we say, it's sometimes more difficult to go to the airport or to another town, in the vicinity of the first one than going to downtown, for instance. There is not necessarily a lot of interconnectivity, and we have to have that in mind also in the interest of the airport. When we talk about aerotropolis, bringing businesses, etc., it's also about that. And one word about the future of mobility. We talk a lot about urban air mobility, and some people challenge the feasibility of that. Just to let you know, it's already a reality. Think about São Paulo, Brazil, the most dense city in the world in terms of skyscrapers and traffic and everything. They have 400,000 annual helicopter operations annually over downtown São Paulo, and this is performed with a high level of safety. So yes, it's feasible, but of course, if we want to do that all weather conditions and everywhere around the world, we will need a revolution in urban air traffic management. About sustainability, we could talk a lot about that, but just maybe one thing, we hear a lot about fly shaming, and I think that we have to have a more holistic vision of the impact of aviation on climate change and the environment in general. Of course, aviation emits greenhouse gases, but as do any human activity, any mode of transportation. And we have also to consider first all the value added of aviation to society in terms of jobs, of opportunities worldwide. It's not only about the long-range, high-speed mobility function of aviation. And second point, we have also to take into consideration huge efforts that aviation has undertaken for reducing its footprint, and decades before we heard about flight shaming. Aviation is nothing without aviation people. And all of the changes we talked about during this webinar will have an impact on human resources and the need for aviation education. Remember the first IT revolution? We had a lot of intermediate and senior aviation professionals. They had to, learn about the computers and electronic devices, etc. We are going to have the same phenomenon with the second IT revolution with intelligence systems. And again, a new revolution after, and again, and again, and again. So we have this acceleration of technology breakthroughs, and we will have to integrate change management to regular operations. And the last message is, for this webinar at least, of the future of airports is about discriminations and biases. We are in 2020. It's time to close all these gaps. In aviation, we are not the worst, I think, because we have a diverse workforce and the world is our guest. So I think we have a different vision of diversity and inclusion. But still, for instance, if you consider only the gender-based discrimination, it costs up to $12 trillion annually to the global economy, 16% of global income. So when we think about finding money for solving hunger, for solving climate change, etc., well, this is 16% of additional revenue that we could bring on the table. This is lost just because of missed opportunities, because of discrimination and biases. So it's time to close these gaps and to get rid of these discriminations and biases. Thank you for your attention. Now it's going to be time for your questions. Just a last thing before addressing your questions. We are a bit late on the release, the physical release of the white papers on the website of ENAC alumni. They should be available at the end of the week. What I will do, I have your email addresses through the registration process that I will use for a follow-up email. And I will let you know when the white papers, posters, etc. will be available. You have the address of the website of ENAC alumni on the bottom of the slide, and you can follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We will continue to promote the future of airports. So please follow us. And now it's time for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gael, for your presentation. So before moving into the very short Q&A period, I would like to remind attendees to enter your questions in the question box on the GoToWebinar platform. All remaining questions that we will not be able to answer today, Gael will answer each and every one of you. Also, you can download the PDF version of the presentation from the handout box of the dashboard. So let's move to the first question. To what extent is the discussion focused on the US market versus the rest of the world?
Okay, so this phase of the research was about the world. It was not focused on the US market or any specific regions. And actually in the white papers, you see that we talk about the world and we mention case studies, lessons learned, and stories from all around the world, from the United States, Europe, Canada, Brazil, Bolivia, Singapore, China, everywhere around the world, literally. So it's really a worldwide approach of the future of airports. Phase 2 will be different. We will have regional focus groups. And again, if you're interested in participating to this initiative, please feel free to reach me out and we'll see how we can integrate you to the different focus groups.
Thank you. Next question. Will we fly more or less than today in 2040 and 2070?
That's a very hard question to answer. If we consider country by country, now if we have a global approach of the question, I think we will fly more. I don't know what is going to happen in Northern Europe, for instance, where we see kind of a reluctance to fly more. But if you consider the world, because we should not be European-centric, what about Asia? What about Africa that is going to boom over the coming decades? You cannot say to people, they have access to discretionary funds. They have a very hard time to move from region to region because of ground transportation that is terrible. If they have a safe way to do that through aviation, you should not prevent that. You should give them the opportunity to move, to create business opportunities, to visit their families, etc. So I think we will find more in 2040 and in 2070.
Thank you. Next question. Could we easily de-densify airport passenger terminal? Another question, will COVID-19 change the way we design airports? And the third question, if it's okay, do you envision that medical screening of passengers at airports will become a norm, much as TSA security screening?
That's an excellent set of questions about COVID-19, which is a big deal. You know, it's the first time in aviation history that we see such a long slowdown of the traffic and of that amplitude. So about airport planning and design, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. Thinking about design and operations, you know, more in detail, what you put into your box of terminal facility, it might have an impact. And it's difficult to say today because we are in the middle of the crisis, but we might see some kind of standards of biosafety comparable to what happened after 9/11 on security screening, with at least, for instance, is something that I see as something realistic, you know, at least for international departures and arrivals, we could do some kind of checks, at least the front temperature, the forehead temperature, and maybe when we have specific epidemics, you know, popping up somewhere in the world, we could do fast tests on passenger on this specific disease. For instance, right now the pharmaceutical industry is developing, is trying to develop 15-minute tests for the COVID-19. That could be something what we could integrate to the passenger journey. And we might have to find some place for this process, of course, a little bit like the same kind of challenges that we had right after 9/11 when we had to accommodate more, you know, stringent security screening processes, you know, at airports.
Thank you.
And sorry, I forgot the first question about deconcentrating or something like that. Passengers, I don't think it's going to happen. You have old rooms, you have queues at an airport. You cannot have everyone 6 foot apart one of the other. It's not going to happen.
Thank you. We'll take the last question. How will we prepare coastal airports for rising sea levels?
Oh, that's a very good question, actually. Well, the first question is, do we want to prepare them for that? Some airports, especially smaller airports, actually, when you have your tree for decision making, maybe you will realize that it's too expensive to adapt some airport facilities to the rise of sea level. And you might say, oh, it's better to just abandon the airport and to rebuild somewhere else where it's protected from the sea level. Now, most of the airports, I mean, you're going to have, I think a good example, you know what, is the Kansai International Airport in Japan. They have been challenged with the rise of sea level and the typhoons for decades. And what they have been doing is that they have been spending a lot of money for improving their infrastructure and their resilience to this kind of events. Of course, they have ski walls that they have been raising and raising again. And after Typhoon Jebi, they decided to raise the level of the surface course of one of their runway by 1 meter. That's a huge work, but this is what many airports might face. And maybe actually you might see a combination of the two approaches. Maybe some airports, you will just accept that a certain number of days per year where you are flooded. And you have to adapt your infrastructure for having this temporary flooding that does not damage or limit the damage due to the seawater on your infrastructure. So you will have probably different approach based on the type of airport and the kind of, the business case of an adaptation plan to climate change.
Thank you. So we're at the end of our webinar session. Please feel free to follow up directly with Gael via the contact details shown on the screen. We have more questions, and Gael will be happy to contact you directly to answer all your questions. I would like to thank all attendees for joining today, and again, a big thank you, Gael, for presenting today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I will wrap up the webinar now. Thank you.